Welcome, everybody, to the RetroPGF podcast, episode number 2. Today, we are joined with EthernautDAO's founder and active Optimism Governance member, gonna.eth. And I'm really excited to have Gunna on the podcast because not only did EthernautDAO qualify for RetroPGF and has done a lot of great work as far as bringing developers from Web 2 into Web 3. Gunna has also been an extremely active member in Optimism Governance, and so I've gotten to know him pretty well over the last few months working together on the Grants Council. Gunna, how's everything going?
Good, everything's good. Everything's running okay.
So I was thinking maybe we could start just for anybody listening to do a little bit of background on you and how you got into Web3, and then maybe how that journey ended up finishing with EthernautDAO and how you decided to found EthernautDAO and what the story behind EthernautDAO was.
Okay, so I studied game design and architecture. That's my background. I worked in the fiat world for 18 years, and in 2020 I founded EthernautDAO with the Ethernaut, who is a dear friend of mine and a core developer from Synthetics. The idea was to kind of, I was trying to look how to add value to the space back in that day. I still do that. And I didn't have like a developer background to create some sort of code, magical code to add value to the space. So the EthernautDAO was kind of the best thing that happened to me in that sense, because I could start somewhere, you know?
Maybe backing up a bit, I'm curious how you met Ethernaut.
Yeah,
Was that
the Ethernaut.
a IRL friend, or did you meet through Web3?
Yeah, he's a real life friend. Yeah.
So was that how you initially got pulled into the world of Web3 to start? Was through him, or
I mean, there's two stories there. I mean, he called me like on April 2019, I think, and he said, "Hey, there's going to be a bull run the next year, so start learning how to trade." And I said something like, "Fuck off." Uh,
that's great.
and then, yeah, 1 year later, I'm with lockdown. I never touched crypto in my life. And he came back on April and said, "Hey, you should pay attention here." And I said, "Okay, you know what? I have the time." And I started reading about it and fell in love with crypto, actually, but more in the sense of what crypto means than on the trading stuff.
Right, right. Okay, so you have your friend, the Ethernaut, and you're trying to figure out how to get more involved or how to add value to the space without being a developer. Um, what was the initial thought behind Ethernaut DAO? Um, Go ahead. Yeah.
So the story. Well, I call my friend's kid to tell her happy birthday, and by the end of the call, I was opening the EthernautDAO Discord server with her father. You know, uh, we were in the middle of a bull run by then, and it was impossible to get senior crypto devs to expand the teams. And he tested a theory by giving a 2 month crash course to some senior developers from outside crypto, and the result was awesome. So after that, EthernautDAO made a lot of sense. We just needed a place to bring senior developers from Web3 and senior developers from Web2 and get them to connect each other, you know?
So my basic understanding of EthernautDAO is that it's a program for senior Web2 developers to be mentored for 2 months to bring them into Web3. Is
Exactly.
that about right? And so what's the process for a, like, how does that process like end to end? If there's a senior developer in Web2, do they apply to the DAO, or how has that worked so far?
So they join the DAO, they say, hey, I need a few developers. And what we basically do is we give him the space to create a mentorship. And that mentorship is posted on our server and people apply to it. It's all for senior developers, so I try to filter that proposal, that mentorship proposal, um, and then once he has selected the members, he starts training. And what we do there is we provide some guidance on how that crash course has to be done to be completed in 2 months.
Awesome. I think one of the really interesting things about Ethernaut DAO, as far as RetroPGF is concerned, is that it's really a Ethereum ecosystem wide project, right? It's not necessarily an Optimism specific project. Do you actually, is there like, what is the, if any, component that's Optimism specific with Ethernaut DAO?
So the project was born chain agnostic. I like to say it like that. But we needed to deploy a few things. I mean, we were initially attracted to Optimism because the Ethernaut used to be whitelisted in Optimism back in the day when you needed to be whitelisted to kind of deploy contracts. And we needed a cheap platform for the donations of the DAO. So back then, the transactions in mainnet were about 50 to 100 bucks, and we didn't want to spend donations like that. So we deployed everything in Optimism, and since then, I felt I had to protect the ecosystem that was providing EthernautDAO with a place to live. You know, then when Optimism public goods came out, it was a call for me to participate in it. You know, I grew up in a small town with one public hospital, one public school, one public gym, and so on. You didn't have to pay to have health education or practice any sport. And in fact, some of my schoolmates could have breakfast just because it was available at the school. And that gives you some perspective on just how important public goods are.
This is a kind of a beautiful story because you came to Optimism for the low fees as a public good, but then Optimism's public goods mission kind of was able um, to come and meet you halfway in the ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes,
So
it was like that.
when when do you remember when you first actually heard about RetroPGF for the first time? Was that before deploying on Optimism, or was it after you were already in governance and deployed on Optimism?
Hmm. Let me think that. So I I think since day one, you know, I'm following Optimism since the whitelisting times. The Ethernet was batch holder on RetroPGF 1. So I got to lead the whole process representing EthernautDAO back in the day.
Awesome. So did Ethernaut DAO actually? They only qualified for retroactive funding in round two, right? Or what, was there also um,
No, no,
with round one as well?
Yeah, we are part of the. I think we are on 14th place or something like that, or seventh place in the RPGF one
Ah,
actually.
that's awesome. Yeah, so I remember you had mentioned that, and I went back and looked, but I must have missed it. But that's pretty crazy. You guys are like the OG retro PGF crew, right?
Yeah, we are there since the beginning. I mean, we got like 14K uh, back then. We actually paid the donation system and the NFT art and some of the salaries for people that have been working there for over like 7 months for free. So,
So you
um,
immediately
so
put that to work. Um,
yeah, yeah.
that's awesome.
I,
So
I
did
I do have to mention that we got some donations before the Retro PGF, so we had everything like kind of in place already when we got those funds.
so I'm curious. So you still have donations open, I'm assuming for the DAO, right?
Yeah, we opened donations for the DAO some months before the Retro PGF one.
Okay, and so I know you were also successful in round two of Retro PGF. Um, how has receiving like now two consecutive rounds of Retro PGF changed the way you think about operations in the DAO? Like looking forward, or I guess one question I'm curious about is to date, have you received more funds through RetroPGF or through donations um, just as a whole?
That's a nice question, because you have to understand that our donation platform went live in full bull run, so
Right, right.
so it's hard
So,
to tell that, but I think it's half and half. Let's say like that. Half of the treasury it's because of donations. So we raised like 40 ETH, and then we got by now we had like 100K from RetroPGF, 100K OP tokens. So
so yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's hard to
I'll
calculate
say half and
prices
half.
when it's a moving target.
Yeah, exactly. But it changed a lot, because one thing uh, is to be waiting for someone to donate. The other thing is kind of securing capital, uh, like in an instance. It's not the same. I mean, the 40 Ether came in a year-long period. So the retro PGF it's kind of more reassuring of the expenses that you can have, as a DAO.
Right. Um, so then thinking about Retro PGF round three, which I'm assuming um, you will be participating in. Have you been doing anything over the last few months to kind of prepare for round three, or is it mostly just business as usual?
For us, it's business as usual. I mean, we don't try to force impact. Uh, we do we do have. I mean, we have 5 mentorships that happened the last 3 months. They are all optimism oriented. That's 15 more developers into the ecosystem. And we're talking senior developers. It's not just some basic level stuff. It's people that they already have a job, they already know what they're doing in the space,
Right,
and they are already, some of them are already core contributors and at some protocol. So the impact is there, so yeah, that's we keep doing stuff. We're not doing it for RetroPGF. Actually, we're using RetroPGF right now to fund games, educational games,
do you want to
so we
maybe
can.
just because I saw that's also something you are they already launched yet? Or I know they were in the plans in the last few months.
Yeah, there's one that has just one level. It's called EVM runners, but it's still a niche. You know, it's for senior developers to learn how to optimize gas on their code. So what it does is it tells you how to solve something, and you have to upload your code, and it checks how much gas are you spending on your code. You know. Uh, so it is a niche game, but it's a pretty fun way to scale education for developers.
Yeah.
Uh, and we think that EthernautDAO in the future should become this hub of educational games for senior developers, and also use that as some sort of pre-filter for candidates with some other station added to so companies can find them basically.
I mean, I think it's interesting. It's a beautiful game because having more gas efficient contracts is a public good in itself, right? So,
Yeah,
um, so I think one thing that's really cool is you have experience not only as a applicant for retroactive public goods funding, but also as a badge holder, being on the other side and making decisions as far as what other projects in the ecosystem uh, deserve funding based on the impact that they've had. So, do you have? I know, like, I didn't really prep you on this, but if do you have maybe you want to run down like how that process went and what you were looking for and projects that you were actually funding?
yeah. First of all, let me say that I had an obvious conflict of interest with EthernautDAO, so I didn't vote on it. Just to clarify,
Yeah.
but it was messy. I have to say, it was a lot of work in such a short period of time. We have like 200 projects that we need to kind of filter in 1 week and a half and vote, you know? So my my process was pretty fast, and what I did is basically focus on that things that I know more. Like if it was something on infrastructure or for developers, I will kind of push it forward, and I left things that I don't use that much for others to vote.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting. Um, I know there's a lot of debate on whether that. I think the idea that was landed on for round two at least was that each badge holder is bringing their own special uh, expertise, like sphere of knowledge into the round, right? And so you're only expected to vote on those projects that you're aware of. And for you, it sounds like these were mostly developer tools and developer themed projects.
Yeah, the idea was not to fake knowledge. So if it was something that you are not uh, kind of involved with, there's someone out there that is. So be sure they will get their funds.
So EthernautDAO is has like some Optimism native type pieces, but it is kind of a Solidity broad Ethereum ecosystem project. How do you view projects that are Optimism specific versus broader focus as a badge holder?
Well, for example, EVM runners will run in Optimism, you know. So even if EthernautDAO is chain agnostic, at least the things that EthernautDAO is building as a DAO are going to be deployed on Optimism. And that means It's chain agnostic basically because Solidity it's a code language that you can use on any EVM compatible chain. But we do push all of our developers to try to deploy on Optimism if they can.
Awesome. Do you?
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just curious. Do most of the developers that end up working for other protocols, or do they start their own projects?
I'll say half and half because some mentorships are open specific for a protocol. For example, Synthetics got like 5 guys, and they needed. I remember they needed at some point a backender, and it was specific Synthetics backend mentorship. So the training started already showing how Synthetic works, and they were full on into that protocol specific. But then you have some more open mentorships. We call it public goods mentorships. They don't end up with a job interview,
Right.
but they end up with you building something that you want to build.
Cool. And so those can just be, are those projects picked by the mentor or by the
Uh,
applicant?
it's usually a middle ground. So the mentor comes and say, "Hey, I want to share my knowledge. Uh, Let me know what you want to build throughout this mentorship," and he picks the candidates on the project.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, I think um, because you're so involved in optimism and optimism governance, I think it would be interesting to talk about optimism as a whole, just for a little bit. So
Mhm.
obviously, you guys chose optimism as the platform to deploy, and you are one of, if not the most active optimism delegates in governance. And to everybody listening, let me tell you, working with Gunna on the Grants Council, he's running operations for the Grants Council right now, and it's been amazing to see we've switched platforms and everything has gone so smoothly. Um, I'm amazed that you have any time in the day. I was surprised when you said yes to this interview because I didn't give you a whole lot of notice, and I'm sure your schedule is booked. Um, but I'm curious, what are you excited about in the world of optimism right now?
Oh, so many things. I mean, I'm excited. The good thing about reading proposals all day, because that's what we're doing right now at Grants
Right,
Council, is that you live in the future, You don't live this present. You're living what optimism is going to be the next year. And let me say that it's amazing. When it's coming, it's amazing. And you could live in the future too. I mean, all the proposals are public and ready to read in Chamber. So it's not a privilege. It's just time that you spend there.
right. I think that's one of the beautiful things. I mean, so you came into optimism governance through as a representative for EthernautDAO, right? Um, But when you came in, did you already know some of the people at Optimism, or did you know how all the governance works? Like, how was that process?
Well, we used to have a channel in Optimism Discord that it was called EthernautDAO, and I had contact with one of the devs only, and it was because our NFT project was one of the first. Um, we kind of needed someone on Optimism to approve a few technical things on their side, but that was it on what I had uh, in connections with the team. Um, when the governance came out, I told myself that I wanted I wanted to contribute there, you know. So if you go to, for example, to the delegates uh,
The original
page,
delegate forum post where people could
yeah,
pre-airdrop, where people could put their name down to be a delegate.
exactly. I'm the first one
Oh,
there, you
that's
know.
awesome. That's a fun
Yeah,
fact.
I'm number one delegate there. I'm the first guy that went there and say, I want to be an optimism governance
So
delegate,
that
you
makes
know?
you the
Uh,
first optimism delegate because it's an open, right? It's open governance. Whoever says they
yeah,
want to be the first one is the first one.
yeah, it's a fun story. I didn't want to be the first one, but I took like 24 hours to put my delegate text there, and no one came in. It was like, shit, I'm going to be the first guy that kind of
That's
does
crazy.
this thing.
I think you need to put that in
But
your
it's
Twitter bio or something because that is really cool.
first delegate. Yeah, no, it's a fun story, but I actually don't like the spotlight, you know? It's hard for me to come here and talk about these
Well,
things.
I think I speak for everybody. We appreciate that you're talking because you really do have a good story. And I know anyone who's active in the optimism uh, ecosystem recognizes your name because, I mean, you're the number one delegate. You've been here from the beginning and you've been working tirelessly, um, just behind the scenes, like everything, but also on the forums, constantly giving feedback, approving proposals, everything. You've been doing a great job. So I'm very happy that
Well,
you're
you know,
here.
thank you. I like to call myself the human backend of both the Grants Council and the EthernautDAO.
I think that's an appropriate description. So
Yeah,
I'm curious, jumping back to RetroPGF, because
yeah.
this is the RetroPGF podcast. Um, Thinking about the future of RetroPGF and where, like the potential of RetroPGF. If we imagine that we're 5 years in the future and RetroPGF is full swing with regular rounds, what would be kind of the perfect iteration of that for you? Thinking kind of just as a general optimism ecosystem crypto enthusiast, but also more specifically for EthernautDAO. Um, what would you love to see as kind of the final form of RetroPGF?
Oh
I know it's
gosh, so
a
many
very
things.
open question.
Yeah, so many things, you know. Let's see. I've been pushing this idea that retro PGF should transition into an ongoing system of continuous voting with some sort of fixed dates for distribution. I'll expand on that. I mean, every time a distribution happens, the votes are reset and we start again. So think 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 it like this. Right now, you should have a link in the comments of this Twitter space for people to rate on this pod, you know? If they find it useful and you can somehow know how much, I mean, you can put the link on Twitter space, they go there, they vote for you, they say they are badge holders and they say, hey, this was kind of useful for me. And you can see how many votes you have, and by the end of the cycle, you get whatever you have to get for it, you know?
Right.
So uh, that's how I see RetroPGF working in 5 years. You can kind of, it's like putting stars on an app right now, but you need to make it a cycle thing, you know?
So instead
So
of having everything condensed into this 2 week voting period where all the data is reviewed, it's a process where as people discover things in the ecosystem, they can kind of place a vote and then at some fixed point, everything is tallied and then the funds are distributed. Is that kind of what you're saying?
yeah, Exactly, and I can see monthly distributions dependent on, I don't know, a percentage of the Optimism monthly transactions, for example, or gas that went into Optimism, something like that, you know. We need something that it's at least 2 months or monthly, because if you're running kind of a public good business, you maybe need to pay salaries on a monthly basis and so on. And having what happened with EthernautDAO, for example, is that we got, I don't know, 100K, okay? And 100K for us is like 1 year, maybe 2 years of run. It's a lot of money, and you start saying, okay, now I need a treasury manager, someone that puts those OP to work, or and it's hard, you know. It's like you open a whole new level of expenses
Right.
on it, just because you have to keep that treasury working. If you have a monthly distribution, that doesn't happen. It's like you just get what you get, and you spend it on keeping the DAO working, and that's it.
Interesting. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea. I think that's one thing for people that are building. I mean, right now, round two was what, 3 or 4 months ago? And round
Yeah.
three was just announced. And obviously, we don't know when round four will be, um, except that there will be a round four, I'm assuming. um, but so, how I'm curious thinking about the voting base. Obviously, the number of projects that in each consecutive round for Retro PGF is hopefully going to grow exponentially um, as the ecosystem grows. So with
Well, if the projects grow exponentially, that means the transactions grow exponentially, you know? So it's a thing that itself pays itself. I don't know if that makes any sense.
right, Ether's Phoenix, right? This is the idea that it's this
Yeah,
positive feedback loop. Um,
exactly.
um, well, that's kind of all the questions I had for you. Is there anything that you wanted to shout out, or any questions that you think I should have asked that you'd want to speak on?
You, you're keeping on some questions. Yeah. You know, I mean, if you ask me, for example, if we can summon the Ether Phoenix that you just mentioned, I think that as I said before, I live in the future since I read proposals, and I think haven't we already? I mean, it's there. It's working. It's just a small bird right now that we're
Right.
feeding every day, but it's there already. It's working. We have so many new apps and so many new transactions every day that will pay for the next round. That it's there.
I think,
You know, you have to see it.
yeah, this concept of Ether's Phoenix, I feel like it's kind of this deep cut right now where not everybody, um, like, I don't hear people talk about it too much when they talk about
Yeah.
Retro PGF. But to everybody listening, there's a blog post on on the Optimism blog that I think initially lays out the concept. But this is the whole reason why why I even kind of got into optimism in the first place. Do you want, maybe I'm curious to hear like how you would explain it to somebody that, well, it's actually the first blog post on Optimism's Mirror uh, blog.
Well, I see optimism like a network state. I don't know if you read Balaji's book on network states. It's a great book to read, but it's like it's like this. So you have optimism. Optimism is now a nation, and the taxes that they collect are the transactions fees. basically, and they say, "Oh, hey, okay, we have this big pot of money on transactions, and we want to have more transactions. So what we do is we invest this money in more transactions, you know, and that investment is public goods, basically."
Right. Um, yeah. And so the Phoenix is this. Uh, I guess the way it was named was that it's a reverse Rocco's basilisk, which I'm not going to explain now, but
Yeah,
it's in the blog post, guys.
yeah. I don't think we need to go that deep
Yeah,
right now on a Twitter space. People, people can read about that.
that's if you enjoyed this space, then that's some extra material for you all. I'm curious, actually, while you're here, as a badge holder, but also somebody who's been through the process now twice, what advice would you have to people who are looking to get involved and potentially actually receive funding in round three, which is coming up this fall?
Well, I'll say keep building, you know, and this doesn't mean that you have to be a developer. I'm not a developer, actually. I don't call myself a developer, so keep building. It happens sooner or later. It took EthernautDAO at least 9 months of me working 6 hours daily with no money to get it where it is now. By the time we got something, there were already 22 core developers in the space, and we were in a bull run. So you have a lot to do, but trust that what you're doing is adding value to the space, and the RetroPGF will find you sooner or later.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Gunna, for coming on. Everyone, I'll try and put this will end up being on YouTube, and in the description, I'll put links to EthernautDAO as well as Gunna's delegate page for Optimism. Um, but it's been great. It's been a great conversation. I can't wait to see, how EthernautDAO grows and also how Optimism grows, because I'm sure you'll be there helping it along the way.
Yeah, I have a question for
All
you.
right.
If people has OP tokens right now, who should they vote? Who should they delegate? You or me?
Ah, that's a good question. How is your I don't know. I actually just got like a big boost. I would have said me a week ago, but
Oh,
I was lucky
nice.
enough to be in the A16Z's cohort, so that I think I might have more delegation. I would say whoever has less because we're both good. And
Congratulations. Congratulations on that.
no, I would say Gunna. If you're
Okay, this
listening,
was
okay, if you're listening to this episode, delegate to Gunna. If it's the next episode, I might say something different.
okay. Great. Have a have a nice night,
All
man.
right. Thank you,
Thanks
everybody,
for
for
this.
coming. And thank you once again, Gunnar. You were a great guest. And yeah, we'll see you all next week on the next episode. Thanks, everyone.